Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live chat, my live stream, actually. Let me just put my phone on non-disturb. Okay, so I think we're streaming, right? Yes, I think we're live. Let me just check to be sure. Are we there? Yup, we're there. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna put my laptop on silent because I don't want you to hear me. Okay, so this is the second time I'm going live. I need to look at the camera over there. And the reason why I'm going live today is obviously because there were some MAGA influencers who are spreading lies about me. Okay, I want to make sure I also open the chat because I do want to be a little bit responsive during all my workshops, and whenever I do anything online, I try to respond to people who are speaking to me. And it's going to be interesting because I haven't done this before. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Let me fix my hijab. All right. What are we going to talk about today? So today we're going to talk about, someone keeps calling me. Let me try to put that on non-disturb. Okay, please. So today we're going to talk about two MAGA influencers who are spreading lies about me. Okay, and these MAGA influencers, they're not just spreading random lies about me. It's literally things that are almost incriminating. There's two people with millions of followers who are saying the craziest things. One said that anyways, I think I have to go back. Okay, I'm just gonna go back. So there's two people, millions of followers, MAGA influencers, and they both said something different about me, and I'm gonna explain to you what either of them said. Okay, now we can hear you. Okay, so the first one is this wannabe actor, MAGA influencer with almost 4 million viewers or followers on Facebook, and his name is Terrence K. Williams. I literally never heard of him. Must be so B-class, maybe even D-class actor. He posted my, thank you so much, KLS, for reminding me, but I think it works now, inshallah. Okay, so he said about me, Muslims plan to take back America. This woman and others claim Muslims originally discovered America and converted indigenous tribes to Islam. Wait, I mean, okay, yeah, we were there before Europeans, but I never said that we are trying to take America back. And he said, therefore, Muslims are the real Americans. I also never said Muslims are the real Americans. And he said, hey, lady, America wasn't founded on your imagination. It was shared 1,600 times. Okay, then there was another person, and this was on Twitter. It was Real Malouf. It's a Lebanese, guys, a Lebanese creator, MAGA influencer. And she said, so she posted my video, and then she said, she claims Muslims discovered America and converted indigenous tribes to Islam. And therefore, Muslims are the real Americans. What do you think? That's what she said to her followers. And then 2,000 people shared it. And obviously her followers are loads of, I think, MAGA supporters as well, but also a bit like Zionists, I understood from all the bomb gifts and all the very violent messages, because that's where all the death threats come from, by the way, at least I saw them mostly in her comment section. So this is a Lebanese person. She's a political scientist, what I understand. And I asked Grok and Gemini who it was. They gave me an answer, but they couldn't show me any sources. I did find a website of her, of Dr. Malouf. She's using a picture of a man, by the way. And it says, I support indigenous and persecuted Middle Eastern minorities like the Jewish people, the Yazidis, the Druze, Copts, Assyrians, and Lebanese Christians. And then she said, we are all in this together. Help me amplify my voice, bring awareness to our common cause, and fight for our right to self-determination. So that's the excuse of the second MAGA influencer who posted my video. She was like, yeah, she supports all the minorities in the Middle East, and therefore she runs a Twitter account that completely bashes Muslims. I don't understand how you can be like that, especially as a fellow woman. And when you try to find out who she is, you get an answer. But then I think she scrubbed the internet of all the proof. And then 13,500 people insulted me on her page, which I also thought was a bit weird for a woman to let happen to another woman. But I guess for some people, that's normal. Anyways, guys, I hope my video is, yeah, it is showing right now. Okay. Okay, let's see. Then I'm gonna go through a few things, okay? Because I get the same questions all the time from you guys, but also from new people when I meet them. And so I just want to make some things clear, but also just about this video, because like, look, there's two reasons why I decided to make this video. One is, I'm really surprised by the fact that two major MAGA influencers started coordinating with each other to misrepresent what I do and say and post my content without letting them know who I am. Because if they would have let them know who I am, they could have checked out my profile. I don't think it would have made things better, but then I think they would know that what these two influencers are saying is not true. And so I did feel like they coordinated this together, because I find it very weird that they're doing it at the same time. But then I also noticed that both influencers had similar content the days after. So that means that on Wednesday, this Wednesday, when the attack took place in America, they both had similar content to, again, you know, incriminate Muslims, to talk poorly about Muslims in America. And so that to me did show that there was like this type of campaign they were following. That's what it seemed like. And to be honest, I never really wanted to respond to this. I laughed at the death threats. I even posted them on my Instagram, as you know, if you're following me on there, because I think that's funny. But the thing is, I don't know what's next for these people. I don't know how they're going to use my content more. It seems like in the US currently there is a campaign going on to target Muslims. And I could see them using more of my content to try to do that and misrepresent me, or try to, like, you know, just make up things I didn't say. And so that's why I thought I'm going to make this podcast. Also, I had to make a new podcast this week. But also, I wanted to talk about what I think Muslims should do right now, how I think they should prepare. And I think they need to be aware of the fact that this is happening. Like, this is not something that's just a coincidence, in my opinion. I think there's a very coordinated effort to reach a certain goal in the upcoming period. And I think that we all should be aware of that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. All right, that brings us to the next point. Something I really want to discuss with you is, what is it that I've said before in the past about America and about what I think about the US? Okay, I just want to discuss that with you. So if you watched my podcasts in the past, you know that I've never tried to encourage anyone, any Muslim, to go to America in general. Like, no offense. Well, yeah, I don't know if I should say no offense. I don't really care if people are offended. But the thing is, I just don't think it's a country worth visiting when you go on a holiday or when you want to live somewhere, because I find it a very dangerous country. And that's my opinion, but I'm not just saying it randomly. I say it because, in my opinion, it is a highly underdeveloped country. And actually, this is not an opinion. I have a lot of statistics to illustrate this, and I've used these statistics in other podcasts as well to illustrate this. Okay, I think the US is very dangerous. It's very corrupt. I think that nobody hates Americans more than the American government. I've also said this before. And that's not just because I think they're randomly hating their people. I think it's also, again, very coordinated. Like, for example, if you look at the way that the government allows certain toxins to be in the food, like FDA approved foods, I find that weird for a country, for a government to do. If you look at how they've dealt with certain scandals in the past few months where very vulnerable minorities were mistreated, abused, they didn't take that seriously. And I think that a country that claims to be so superior when it comes to human rights and, you know, everything should do a better job than they are right now. And so, yeah, that's why I usually say the US is very underdeveloped. Let me check. Okay, I think it's still working. Okay, so yeah, that's why I say that. Some of the stats I've quoted in the past, by the way, I'll just throw them in there again. Okay, these are things you can also find online, okay? Like, I'm not making this stuff up, but the US has 750 to 850,000 teenage pregnancies per year, okay? Then 46.3 million people in the US had a substance use disorder in 2021. So there were more than 46 million people who were drug abusers. Then 5 million Americans meet the criteria for compulsive gambling. Then American literacy rate is around 80% currently. I mean, compare that to Palestine, which has almost 100% literacy rate. I mean, these are the things that make me say America is not a developed country, and I don't see why anyone would want to move there for like any opportunities. I think you're really downgrading. So for me to say Americans want to take over, or Muslims want to take over America, like that doesn't really make sense, you know? Like that's why I was really offended by these posts. Well, I wasn't offended, but it's just so like the opposite. Like it just doesn't make sense. Okay, and that's why I did want to make also this video, because it's just like literally the opposite of the truth. It couldn't have been more far of the truth. That's what I just feel about these videos. Okay, so when it comes to Muslims going to America, do I believe that they should go back, reclaim the land? No, I don't think Muslims need to go to America to like reclaim the land. First of all, we never claimed the land. Muslims never went there and, you know, genocided all these indigenous people, or, you know, tried to dominate them or tried to enslave them. Like Muslims just didn't do that. So there is no case of reclaiming, because we never claimed it in the past. If anything, when Muslims went anywhere, they traded, they shared wealth, they shared knowledge, and they shared their religion, but they didn't go anywhere to subjugate people. Like that's a very European phenomenon, and I don't think people need to say that I'm the one who's like promoting that. I would never promote something like that. And, you know, Muslims going to the Americas, like to do what? Like to rehabilitate all the millions of women on OnlyFans, or all the millions of fathers or brothers or husbands who aren't taking care of their wives and daughters and their sisters. No, why would I push people to do that? Like we have so many countries that we can go to in the Middle East that are amazing. Like Muslims don't need to go to America, not even for a holiday. That's my general point. You know, Americans cannot even protect their own citizens. They cannot protect their own politicians. They cannot protect their own celebrities. I don't think any tourist has any business going to America right now. Like, that's my honest opinion about it, without trying to be shady. But I would just never promote the idea that we need to go there, like, to live or reclaim. Like, that's crazy, okay? Nobody needs that. Okay, but why is it that I do speak about Muslims reaching the Americas before Columbus did? Because that's obviously something I do. I do that a lot. I love talking about that. The reason why I talk about that is because I like to just emphasize how Muslims have always interacted with other civilizations. Like, that's something I'm seriously proud of. And it's something that I think not a lot of Muslims know about. I think a lot of times this narrative about Muslims is being pushed that illustrates or kind of like pushes the opposite. And so that's just not something that I'm a fan of. It's not something that I think is true. And that's why I really want people to know what the truth is about Muslims in America in the past. Okay. So let's go on. Okay, another thing which I like to emphasize, and I've done this before a lot in the past, is that Muslims also were the ones who were in Australia before Europeans. And, like, obviously, I mean, where weren't we? And I'm specifically talking about the Indonesian Muslim fishermen who were catching trepang, which is like a special type of fish. They went there, they traded with the Aboriginals, they had, good trade relations, they intermingled, intermarried. I know that even the Aboriginals, they went back with the Muslim Indonesians to Indonesia to stay there, sometimes for a year, and then go back during the fishing season back to Australia. And it's really nice because there's this book about this. It's called, I have it on my ebook. I think it's called Dreaming Something. Wait, Australian Muslim Aboriginals. It's called, what is it called? Islam Dreaming? Yeah, that's it. Islam Dreaming, Indigenous Muslims in Australia. And it's about Indigenous Muslims because also amongst the Aboriginals, they converted to Islam because they had such good relationships with the Muslims. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is like literally just a copy paste of what Muslims did in the Americas. They just had great relationships with the indigenous people. I'm not saying that the Muslims were there before they were the indigenous people or that Muslims are the indigenous people. I never said that. But I just like these examples of how Muslims, have been always like everywhere, and they were just always like very peaceful with people. I love that. Okay. Then I want to go to the next point, and that is, let's see, that it's not just the Muslim Indonesians who went to Australia, obviously. It was also the Arabs who once upon a time went to Indonesia. And Indonesia currently is the biggest Muslim country in the world. But they also converted, at their own pace, in their own way. I mean, there have been people, groups of people, kingdoms that were still a bit traditional Indonesian, not following Islam completely. There were Muslims who were, following strict Islam from Saudi Arabia, like a purified Islam. But the Indonesians, I think, are a great example that Islam is not at all forceful because you still have entire places that are not Muslim at all. For example, Bali, right? Bali is a Hindu island of Indonesia, and it just shows that when Muslims go places, they don't force people to become Muslim. You can do whatever you want. And I love talking about that because the opposite is always portrayed. It's always like, oh, Muslims go everywhere and they hurt everybody and then they force religion on them. Like, that's just not what history says, though. Yeah, maybe the revised books that you made up, but that's not how it went if you look at even the state of Islam in those countries. Like, why is it that in Egypt there's still so many Christians if Muslims always go everywhere and force people to become Muslim? It's just not true. Okay, one thing I will say, though, for colonizers everywhere, if it's about Dutch colonizers, Portuguese colonizers, British colonizers, or Spanish colonizers, Muslim populations have always been a huge thorn in their eyes. Is that English? Is that English? Because it is Dutch. Oh, that was literally something Dutch I said. Okay, anyways, what I meant by that is that they are like people who cause problems for them because they don't want to be submissive. Okay, anyways, that's the point I was trying to make. And yeah, I mean, I've talked about this like throughout all my podcasts. For the Dutch, it was definitely Muslims in Indonesia, Muslims who followed purified Islam, by the way. The Muslims who went to Mecca and came back were a huge thorn in the eye. They were a huge problem for the Dutch colonizer, but also the Muslim enslaved people, the Malay people from, Southeast Asia. I think it's Southeast Asia, from like Singapore, Malaysia, who were shipped to, what is it called? Cape Town, South Africa. And they were also the ones who rebelled a lot, the ones who didn't want to leave their religion behind, even though there was a death punishment upon being Muslim amongst the enslaved people, the Malay enslaved people in South America. But they were strong, mashallah, because even until this day, many South Africans are Muslim. Okay. And yeah, I think one thing that really bothers me about American and European Western history is that they pretend like they invented sea travel. Like they literally have the audacity to pretend they dominated the seas. They dominated the seas. They dominated science so much that they had the tables to calculate the circumference of the earth. They were the ones who invented the astrolabes. They were the ones who wrote the maps. That's not true. Those were Muslims, okay? Those were Muslims. Muslims dominated those. I'm talking about Miriam al-Ijla. I'm talking about al-Idrisi, al-Masudi. I'm talking about Ahmad ibn Majid. They were the ones who were dominating on the sea, on the land, in the universities. They were the ones writing the books and guiding European travelers. Not all, but for example, Columbus, he was being guided by many Muslim inventions. He used the tables by Al-Farghani. He used an astrolabe, which, is something that Maryam al-Ijliya she did not invent it, but she did bring it to a very high level, to the point where it is called now the smartphone, the first smartphone that we've ever had. According to a American historian, Columbus was traveling with the maps made by al-Idrisi. And he was also using Muslim captains who were steering his ships. So yeah, this was not a European invention. Muslims were there way before in all these fields. So for them to now be like, oh, it's so impossible that Muslims ever went to America, like that's a huge lie. And the funny thing is, any person who has studied history will have to admit that that's just a huge lie. And it's also something that is so irrational. It's just so irrational if you know anything about the history of any civilization. Like, Muslims were incredibly intellectual during those times. I'm not saying they're the only ones, by the way, because there's evidence. I mean, the University of California has proven that the pharaohs even went to America. I mean, they've proven that. The University of California, American university. There's Chinese civilizations who thousands of years ago went to the Americas, and they documented their trips. They documented what America looked like. I mean, the evidence has been presented in the Library of Congress. So this is well known, but I do feel like, okay, I think the evidence about the Chinese coming there is probably being a bit suppressed, although very recently, I would say this has still been something that, it's been something that was known, because they were talking about this in the Library of Congress, like I just said, like this is not something they were hiding. But I do think that because for many decades, there have been so many issues with, Americans wanting to invade the Middle East, this is something that's completely suppressed. Anyways, that's oh my God, I only have 20 minutes left. Okay. Then I'll just mention something really short. Do I believe Muslims should be in America? I don't know. I think residing in a Muslim country is very tricky nowadays with the amount of fitna around. I think it's also dependent on two conditions, if you could fulfill them. One is if you have enough knowledge to be a good Muslim. The second one is if you can openly practice your religion. I don't think both are present in countries like the US, but I don't know. My personal experience is that now living in a Muslim country, There's way more opportunities there to pray. There's way more opportunities to be a good Muslim, to not deal with interest, to not be exposed to a lot of nudity. So that's my personal view on that. There's one thing I did want to say though. One example I love to talk about is the Tatar Muslims, because they have done something extraordinary in the history of Muslims. Well, maybe others have done it too, but I know about them because books have been written about them by American professors. Because again, I love to quote American professors because you guys love to deny so many things about Muslims that I want to be like, here, read your own books and read about what professors on these topics say about Muslims, and you'll find out that the things you know are not true. Okay, so I'm going to quote specifically a book by, his name is Brian Glynn Williams, and he was a professor in Islamic history at the University of Massachusetts. And he also worked for the CIA. Why did so many Islamic professors work for the CIA? Because Muslims are known to have resisted Sovietization like no other. So obviously everybody was obsessed with us. And the Crimeans, they are the indigenous people, the Tatars, they're indigenous people of Crimea. So it doesn't belong to Ukraine. It doesn't belong to Russia. It was something that the Tatar Muslims owned. Okay, anyways, doesn't matter to me because what I'm going to tell you is more important. When the Russians came, and this is a few centuries ago already, this isn't very, because like there have been several invasions where the Crimean Tatars were affected, but centuries ago, when the Russians came, they made it very hard for the Crimean Tatars to be Muslim. Okay, so they couldn't openly perform their religious obligations. What did the Tatars do? They were not like, we're gonna fight for our identity, our culture, our nation, our passport. They were like, if we cannot be a Muslim here, we're gonna go. And that's what they did. They literally left. And I wanna explain to you how perfect the plan of Allah is, because once they left, the Russians were missing out on so much money and income that they literally were like, no, please, please, please come back. They were blocking them from leaving. And we're like, we're gonna let you do whatever you want because we need you here. You run things. And then the Tatars were allowed to perform their religion the way they wanted to. And it just shows, you know, if you just put your religion on number one, Allah will take care of you. And that's what happened to them, you know. Like a lot of people will say, okay, but you know, the culture and everything that the Tatars have done has been erased, which is true because they didn't really care about leaving a lasting imprint for centuries to come. They were Muslims first, and then any type of culture or group, demographic, whatever, ethnicity. But they were Muslims first. And I personally think that doesn't really matter if you're leaving like a legacy for centuries to come. It doesn't matter as long as you've been a good Muslim. That's my personal opinion about that. Okay, then I have 15 more minutes. Okay, people ask me all the time. Let me see when the prayer time is, because then I have to stop, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of people ask me a lot of times why I make content about Muslim glory if I'm not scared, okay? And, okay, first of all, sometimes I find it very awkward when people say that to me, because sometimes I meet someone for the first time and they'll immediately be like, oh, I can't believe that you do that. Aren't you scared? And I guess they just don't understand why I would do that, because you put a lot at risk. And then I feel a bit awkward. But it's just, in general, it's kind of awkward when people know more than you when you meet them the first time. So maybe that's it. But I don't know. I find it really awkward when people say this. But I just want to explain something to you, okay? I'm going to explain something to you. Okay. When I used to make content about leadership, I would also get thousands of hate comments. So I get that people are very concerned about me making content about Muslim history, but the reality is that if you're a woman with a platform in the West, you will get death threats, rape threats, you will get violent messages, aggressive messages. That's just the reality of being a woman in the limelight with a Western platform. That's all I can say about that. Doesn't matter if you're going to talk about politics, if you're going to talk about history, if you're going to talk about leadership, you're going to have a hard time. Why is that? Because they don't respect women over there. That's all I can say about it. If you look at the statistics in the Netherlands where I'm from, for example, 1 in 10 comments online targeting female politicians is a violent or aggressive one. Okay? It's one where they threaten to do a lot of crazy things to the politician. And this is the reason why in Dutch politics, for example, many politicians, the women politicians have left. Because being a woman in the limelight in the West is just dangerous. Like, that's just the reality of living in the West as a woman. I'm going to say something that's going to upset a lot of people, but I live in the UAE. If you threaten a woman online, offline, I don't know, if you're going to say it out loud and anyone hears it, there's going to be serious consequences. Woman, man, Muslim, non-Muslim, hijab, no hijab, you are just not allowed to behave like a degenerate. Like, that's just the reality of living here. So when people ask me, are you scared of making content about Muslim glory? No, because I live in the UAE. Would I be scared if I still lived in the Netherlands? Yeah, I would be, because I remember what it was like to live there and to have articles coming out about me, about anything that I was doing, and hundreds of men mostly attacking me. Like, it was crazy. They would literally trash me so much about anything that came out about me online. And this is an experience that most women, if not all women in the limelight, have in the Netherlands. Like, the politicians have it. One of my friends, she does amazing work. She promotes, she advocates against violence against women. She gets loads of threats online. Why? Because she's a woman in the limelight. Like, that's the reality of the West. I'm sorry. Like, I cannot make it sound better, but that's how it is to work there. Okay, anyways. What else? Okay, so another thing, like, if you live here and you do face threats, like, there's actually a portal when you can register that, and there's seriously high fines also for if you do something like that. But you know what? Okay, apart from that, rely on Allah. Whatever needs to happen, that's for sure. I mean, I have my father, he's my guardian. Obviously, I ask him for permission for anything I do. I'm happy to live here. I do not want to move. And yeah, even the society here, I would say, is very protective of vulnerable groups, like minorities, vulnerable groups, I would say. And I would vouch for them that if I would walk the streets and someone would harass me, that the men in this society would stick up for me. Like, that's my personal experience so far. Not that it happened, but just like in small things, I've seen that they're very helpful and they don't want anyone to be in a difficult position. Do they do it to impress me or because I'm a Muslim woman? No, they don't. They do it for the sake of God, because that's what it is to be a Muslim. You do good things for the sake of Allah. And people in the West are always like, oh, but why can't you just do it without having a God? Like, why can't you do it for yourself? Well, you guys don't have God, and look at what your society looks like. I mean, it's not really working out, is it? So I would love to just stay here where I am. And I have to say, I feel good here. Alhamdulillah, I feel really good here. Okay. Then finally, I have 5 minutes left. Okay. I'm going to have to do a part 2, by the way. Okay, first of all, I have to say a few things. Okay. So I want to point out a pattern, which is why I initially wanted to make the podcast, because I don't think it's a coincidence that my content has been used in an inappropriate way to rile up Americans against Muslims, making them scared that we Muslims want to come in and reclaim the land, or that we're planning to do that. I think that there's something going on. I think there's a campaign that's now implemented against Muslims. I think it's specifically against Muslims, not one part of our ummah. I think it's everyone. And I think we could have known that. I think we could have noticed that already when it started with the Nigerians. Like a few weeks ago, all of a sudden there was like this crazy interest in the safety of Nigerian Christians in Nigeria. And American media tried to make it seem like Nigerian Christians were being targeted by Nigerian Muslims, and many Nigerians have spoken up and said that's not at all true. Nigerian Muslims and Nigerian Christians are being targeted right now by rebels. But there was this like incentive to create this a narrative that, you know, Christian America was gonna fight against Nigerian Muslims and protect the Nigerian Christians. Like, it was just this whole thing. And when that happened, I was already like, what is the deal? Like, why are you so fake interested in Nigerian Christians? Like, that doesn't make sense. You don't even care about your own Christians. Like, that, why you all of a sudden in the business of an African country? Like, doesn't make sense. So that was point number one, where I was like, this is super shady. And then I'm going to say something that will, again, upset a lot of people. But I also noticed that the propaganda against UAE was happening in a very unorganic way. All of a sudden, everybody was talking about how UAE was like super involved in the conflict with Sudan, even though there's no concrete, definitive proof. Everything they're saying is very circumstantial. It's like, oh, but they found an Emirati passport on the ground in Sudan. I'm sorry, but that's really giving 9/11 to me. Like, you could literally not convince me about any Muslim crime by saying, oh, we found their passport on the ground. Like, miss me with that one. But then there were also a lot of other things, you know, like, okay, that it was like there was a bank account in the UAE owned by one of these people. It's like, yeah, it's a globalized country, you know, it's an open market. There's no sanctions. There were no sanctions at that point against any country, you know, like, that was just wild. But I did see that there were a lot of these unofficial influencer accounts who were trying to push that narrative. And I and another friend of mine were both like, but what is the push? Like, why is it so sudden and so massive? Like, it just wasn't organic. And I feel the same way about my videos. Like, I've posted my videos several times. A year ago was when I came out with them. Never did it get as much attention as it did now by these two MAGA influencers. And so someone I follow, he pointed out, he said, this is probably a bot farm that is pushing your content to these Zionist and MAGA supporters, because this is not normal. Come on, you know, within 2 hours, it had 6,000 comments. Like, that's just weird. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. So that to me was also, it showed that there's definitely something unorganic going on. Then very recently, they also started causing issues in Dearborn, Michigan, right? Where a lot of Muslims live in the US. They had a huge focus on them. Like, they were so dangerous. The fact that it was like so Islamic made them so, like, I don't know, dysfunctional for some reason, they said. That was also very weird, because if you look at the stats about Dearborn, Michigan, it's the second safest city in Michigan. So for them to all of a sudden push this narrative that there's things going on there that aren't right, like, that doesn't make sense. And then finally, I mean, the fact that this week this attack took place, right, where these two people were attacked by supposedly a Muslim, but it turned out to be former CIA from Afghanistan who worked with the Americans against Muslim Afghans. That to me showed, okay, this is what it was all about. This is where this unorganic push came from. And I can't lie and say that I don't think this is related to Israel. I'm just going to be very quick because I have to pray. On the 18th of November, there was this ex-military spokesman. His name is Daniel Hagari, and he admitted in Washington, D.C. that Israel lost the social media war and that they were going to implement a new centralized propaganda machine, and that they were going to use a lot of fake online identities and bot networks, unofficial social media influencers to fabricate pro-Israel propaganda and to control the global narratives. My suspicion and my own observation is that this is going to target all Muslims. That's why I made this video. I just want you to be aware of that. I want you to be aware of the things you're going to share massively. I know a lot of you don't agree with me on what I say about the GCC countries whenever I speak positively about that, and we can disagree on that. But I know a lot of you are seriously nice to me, and I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the support I've been getting lately from all of you. Like, so many people reached out to me in the past few days to see if I was okay, and I really appreciate that. If you don't want to believe that the GCC countries are being attacked with a lot of propaganda, you do believe, I think, that I was being attacked. And so, I mean, just take that example, just take my example, and whenever you see any Muslim being attacked, remember that that also is me. You know, I'm one of those Muslims whose name is being smeared, whose face is being plastered over tens of thousands of posts saying that I'm actually not tens of thousands. I think it's like more like a few thousand, but there's so many people who are watching that, like hundreds of thousands of people are watching it and saying that I'm just someone who's, you know, trying to steal back America or something, which is not true. So if you care about that, just keep that in mind for any negative thing you see about Muslims. That's all I'm gonna ask from you. And yeah, that's it for today. I had a lot of fun doing this. I will do a part 2 because apparently I didn't have enough time to do the second part of it. And I do want to share with you also the second part, which is about some of the American inventions which are actually Muslim. And so one of them was obviously the Cowboys. Another one was the what is it called? The American system, as in the law system from there. And yeah, I think you're really gonna love that. I cannot wait to share that with you. And there's going to be a part 2 for that. Okay. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you again. It's probably going to be next week. Yeah, inshallah.